One of the things that really happened in the 1900s in the United States was the rise of these oil fortunes. Access to modern energy made certain people much richer, these oil tycoons. This incredible wealth that was accumulated by these energy fortunes often led to great art collections and investments in culture like the Gettys of the world. These museums are showpieces for the wealth of the oil tycoons, but cultural expressions as well.
I think a lot of our culture in the United States can be traced back to personal fortunes that have grown out of industry and transportation. Jean-Paul Getty was an American-born oil man who made a vast fortune at the beginning and throughout most of the 20th century. As a young man, Getty loved to travel. As an oil man, he worked in the oil fields as a boy, and then he would travel around Europe and into the Middle East to negotiate contracts. And of course, as he traveled, he would visit museums. Getty viewed himself as the David in the fight with Goliath. Getty started as a small oil man, and he was up against the Rockefellers and Standard Oil, and they were kind of a model for him. If you think about this site we're at, the recreation of a Roman villa turned into a museum, the Rockefellers built the cloisters in New York. A medieval abbey turned into a museum. The Rockefellers funded the Agora Museum in Athens, an ancient building. You have the Carnegies, you have the Fricks, you have these great individual fortunes that get turned over into culture.
Oilman J. Paul Getty was a millionaire at age 23. And by the late 1960s, he was called the richest man in the world. Getty traveled the globe collecting cultural objects and art.
J. Paul Getty began the collection of antiquities in 1939 when he was resident in Rome, courting his fifth wife, Theodora Lynch, who became Teddy Getty. And he traveled around museums and archaeological sites and dealers. There was a legal antiquities market in Italy at that time. Their prices had dropped precipitously during the Depression, and always wanting a good bargain, he recognized he could get these things at good prices and the value would increase. The first antiquity he bought is this piece here, this small terracotta group, and it's a modern piece. It's an imitation or a forgery. And we long thought that Getty was duped. The auction catalog had Getty's handwritten annotations. He's thinking, how much is he going to bid? He writes 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 to 40. And then he writes modern question mark. We can see him thinking the same way he's buying oil leases. He's taking a calculated risk that he might get something really good for a low price. It didn't work out in this case, but he wasn't duped, he was calculating. Like many collectors, he was deeply invested in his objects. He wrote whimsical fictions, creating backstories. And he really was especially interested in the histories of his objects. Although during his lifetime, he had a reputation not only for being very rich, but also being somewhat parsimonious. He now is, I think, known as an art collector and philanthropist. The Getty Villa is a one-to-one replica of most of an ancient Roman villa, a building we believe was built by the father-in-law of Julius Caesar on the Bay of Naples that was buried but preserved by the eruption of Vesuvius in AD 79. In 1750, workers were digging a well just outside the royal palace near Herculaneum, and they hit this beautiful marble floor, realized they had ancient remains there, and the king began the excavations and then eventually drew up this plan showing his tunnels but also the finds. Paul Getty had in mind to have a replica of a Roman building to house appropriately his Greek and Roman antiquities. It's one-to-one in scale, and it's better than virtual reality. It gives people the experience of walking through a Roman luxury villa. This is the inner peristyle garden. Peristyle just means having columns all around, like perimeter. So we have a small peristyle that's square, and then the large peristyle out there. This room was created for Mr. Getty's favorite statue.